No one was taking it seriously at all. We knew we had to get out of there as soon as possible.
Vamos a cerrar las fronteras del país. El último vuelo entrará el día de hoy antes de las 24 horas.
So we just heard that they're shutting down the border here in Guatemala. So we're not sure if they're going to let anyone leave.
I went ahead and called the embassy. Hey, are you guys gonna do anything to help get American citizens out of Guatemala? I've got a feeling I have it. Hola amigos, we're Jim and Mai, a couple on a mission to travel to every Spanish-speaking country and share the culture and traditions of all of them with you along the way.
And in the middle of going to our third country, Guatemala, we got caught up in the craziest travel experience we've ever had. This past week has been insane.
It really has. Our experience traveling during the current situation with the outbreak and everything was unlike anything we've ever experienced before. So we wanted to share our journey with you guys.
But before we continue, we have to get something out of the way. We do not recommend anyone traveling during this current situation.
So we were working with Worldpackers, a website that helps travelers connect to different cultures around the world, do work exchanges, do volunteer work with NGOs, and it's a really cool website, and we wanted to share them with you guys. That was part of this plan to show you how you could travel for cheap through Worldpackers. And we were connected with a NGO called Niños de Guatemala in Guatemala. So we were planning to be with them for a week, and this is a school that helps serve children in poverty who otherwise might not have the opportunity to go to school.
And so the whole program they have is really awesome, and we were really excited to share that with you. And so we got a little bit of
a taste of what it was like to be there.
Yes, we were there for only one day, but that was enough for us to fall in love with the program and with everything that Niños de Guatemala is doing there for the kids in the community.
So again, this is something that you could do once all of this situation blows over. You could go and volunteer with Niños de Guatemala through Worldpackers, and it's a great opportunity to not only learn Spanish, but immerse yourself in the culture of Guatemala, or really any other Spanish-speaking country, which is what we're all about on this channel. But again, now is not the time for that. We want to share our experience of what travel was like for us in the last week, so you get a sense of how other countries are handling this situation, the problems that came up for us trying to get home. It was really crazy.
So about a week and a half ago, on March 12th, we left Puerto Rico and we arrived in Guatemala, and we had someone from Niños de Guatemala pick us up there, and they took us to Antigua, which is where Niños de Guatemala has their main office. We were received with like the welcome signs of the kids we were going to be volunteering with, and that was really cute. So after that, we made it to our homestay, and we got to meet La Señora Maria Elena, who was our host mom. Would you call her that?
Yeah, it felt like, she was the mom of the house. Her family lived there, and she served us breakfast, lunch, and dinner. She was just a wealth of information and a really kind-hearted woman.
So first day was very casual. We just went to the office for Niños de Guatemala. So it was like an orientation day. We had a meeting there where we learned about the program and everything Niños de Guatemala does. And after that, we just went home and rested, because the following day we were going to go and visit the 3 schools that Niños de Guatemala has.
And again, to give a little more context, a week and a half ago, things were so much different. The vibe was fairly normal. Like, people weren't panicking at this point. Mm-hmm. I think maybe there was one case in Puerto Rico, but it just didn't seem like it was going to turn out to be what it is today.
Yeah, and also there was no cases in Guatemala, so we thought, no virus here really, nothing in Guatemala. We're good. People were not like freaking out yet. Yeah. So we just thought, it's another trip for us.
The only thing that was different during our trip getting to Guatemala from any other trip was they had an extra checkpoint getting into Guatemala where they were checking our temperatures, and they just had a little form asking us if we had any symptoms in the last couple of weeks. They did a quick contactless temperature check, and then we were on our way. So day 2, Friday the 13th, Carlota took us around to a couple of the schools just outside of Antigua, Guatemala, to show us around, see what the kids were up to, and to talk to the principal of the two schools we visited, and just get an idea of what the program was like.
So yeah, after that, we went back to Antigua because you had Spanish lessons there with Niños de Guatemala in their office. So after that, we just went home, and while we were having dinner, the president of Guatemala was having like a live discussion about what was going on with the virus in Guatemala.
And it was then when he announced that they were going to be shutting down the border for Europeans and many Asian countries. So at that point, we weren't too concerned. We thought, okay, well, it's good to take precautions, but we weren't really worried about them closing down the border altogether.
So yeah, we went to bed thinking that everything was fine, that everything was going to continue according to the schedule we had, and that was it for Friday.
Yeah, we had a tour scheduled for Saturday the 14th, our third day there, and we were going to go on a walking tour throughout the city. So we were excited to get a little more of a vibe of what Antigua was all about, and so we woke up early and started our tour to check out the city.
Yeah, we went to El Mirador, El Cerro de la Cruz, we went to the market, we went to some ruins there, and it was cool. I mean, we spent the whole day recording and walking, we learned a lot, but then we went back to our homestay, and everybody was like, what's going on? They canceled school. They decided to also cancel every major event. Like Guatemala was getting ready for Easter celebration, so all of the procesiones were canceled, which are huge celebrations at least in Antigua, Guatemala. So all of that was canceled on Saturday too, and we were like, okay, what's going on?
Yeah, this is when we started to worry, because now with classes being canceled, that took away a huge part of why we were even there. We were there to volunteer with the children, and there were no more classes. So at that point, we decided, okay, well, the tours are still on. We can still get a feel for the place and still have enough footage to make a video. But considering the situation, it didn't feel right to be releasing more of our travel videos, so we decided to make an update about the current situation, which is our last video that we released on the channel, talking about the situation as it was then. And I think if we watched that video again right now, it would be night and day the difference between what was going on then and what developed throughout the week.
So the next day, on Sunday, we released that video, and since we had a bunch of tours scheduled with Niños de Guatemala, we thought, okay, we can still make it work, like Jim was saying, and so someone picked us up from the house and they took us to a volcano there. We also recorded that the hike, and we roasted marshmallows, and it was a beautiful place. We got to see the active volcano with a little bit of lava, but a bunch of rocks falling on the side every like 20 minutes. And it was a really cool experience. We were excited. We were away from the news. We were not checking our email or anything because we were up on a volcano. And after that, I think everything was normal. It was Sunday. We had more tourists and they said, it's fine. If you can still make content for us, if you can still make the videos, everything's going to be normal, except you're not going to have the classes. So we kept doing that. But then the president spoke again, and he decided that the borders were going to be closing.
Vamos a cerrar las fronteras del país. El último vuelo entrará el día de hoy antes de las 24 horas.
And we thought, uh-oh, what does that mean? Because I immediately thought, okay, well, if they're closing, it's kind of like a store closing or a restaurant closing when you're inside, right? Like they should be able to let you leave and then they're closed and no one can come back in. But the messages were kind of mixed there. The president wasn't absolutely clear on whether anyone could leave.
So then we started noticing people in Antigua were maybe not freaking out, but Antigua has a lot of foreigners who live there. who are maybe on a tourist visa, but they go outside of the country and come back every time their visa is about to expire. So we noticed that everyone was saying like, I'm leaving tonight, or I'm leaving tomorrow morning, I have my flight ticket, I'm leaving in 4 hours. And we were like, why?
Yeah, we started to get concerned. We had our ticket out for Thursday and we thought, well, we already have the ticket, why move it? So in retrospect, our next move doesn't seem like the smartest, but we decided, well, if we're gonna have to leave early, maybe we should meet up with some of the people from Niños de Guatemala. So we decided to go out for a couple of drinks at some bars and hang out with them for a bit. Now, again, this just seems absolutely ridiculous in retrospect. Hindsight is always 20/20, but again, at this point, there was only one confirmed case in all of Guatemala, and it was in Guatemala City, about an hour away from where we were. So we went to bed and got ready for day 5, Monday, which would have been our first day of classes. So we got up on Monday to start our day, and we soon learned that there was more bad news. The president was announcing that he would be closing the border that night at midnight.
So we just heard that they're shutting down the border here in Guatemala, and we're looking at flights to get out of here because we're not sure if they're going to let anyone leave. And Mai found a flight just after the announcement from the president for $274, and now if we go to select that flight with Copa, it's $1,511. So we're trying to figure out what we are going to do. We don't have a lot of information to go off of other than what the president here said.
And what that meant was that he was closing all types of transportation, whether it was air, by land, or even by ocean, he said, right? So we started freaking out then.
We got a call from Carlota, who is the volunteer manager, and she said, you guys should start looking for flights out.
We spent all day long looking for flights, and it was really frustrating for us just to go over like every single website for flights. I was looking on Google Flights, Kayak, and all of these other websites trying to find a way out of Guatemala. But every time that I hit buy, it was cancel and cancel and cancel and cancel, and it was just too much at that point.
So we started thinking, what are our options? What are some other ways we could get out? We started looking at shuttles, and we're just out of it by the end of the day. Even though we hadn't gone anywhere, we were exhausted.
By then, the president had also canceled all kinds of like public transportation. No chicken buses, no city-to-city transportation, nothing. Only Uber was available, I think, at that point. We were just so worried about finding a way out that we even called the US Embassy.
Yeah, we called because the Canadian guy that was staying at the same house we were at had contacted his embassy, and they said that they would pay his ticket to get back, because at this point Canada had closed their borders and was calling for all of their citizens who were abroad to come home.
Yeah, and what made this situation even more difficult was that since no one was allowed in the country, there was no airplanes leaving Guatemala or the Guatemalan airport. And also, a lot of the countries around Guatemala had also closed their borders, and we had no idea. Our original flight was supposed to go from Antigua to El Salvador, and that was also canceled because El Salvador had closed its borders too.
Yeah, so the amount of money that we had tied up in flights that were going nowhere was starting to add up fast. So I thought if the Canadian was able to reach his embassy and they said they would pay for a flight, the US must do something similar, right? We had never had to deal with an embassy before, and I thought, well, this is exactly the type of situation why they even exist, right? They're supposed to help their citizens who are abroad, and we are, well, I'm a citizen, Mai has her green card, and we're stuck abroad. We were really afraid of being stuck in Guatemala, not having any friends or family really that we could count on to make sure that we had the resources necessary to survive if things got crazy. So I went ahead and called the embassy and I explained the situation, and real quick, the person on the other end of the line sent me to a pre-recorded message explaining basically the things that we already knew. So I called back and I said, hey, I've heard the recorded message, I've heard the president's announcements. Are you guys gonna do anything to help get citizens, American citizens, out of Guatemala? And they said that they were planning on having a meeting soon to figure out what they could do, but at that time they had nothing. We were just wiped out by the end of the day. It was becoming more and more apparent that the airlines that we were able to purchase tickets from probably just weren't even aware at that point that Guatemala had shut down their borders. They're probably already overwhelmed with tons of other requests from travelers because things were starting to get crazy worldwide.
So on day 6, we were just so desperate. We called the U.S. Embassy again, same thing. They played the pre-recorded message, and again, we were just desperate. We even asked our host mom if she knew anyone who could probably take us to the border, but again, we didn't know if that was allowed, if we could just hire someone and go to the border of Mexico. So she said she knew someone and she called this person, but this person was going to charge us 1,600 quetzales
It's like
each.
$210 each would have been $420 just to get to the border, and this is by land.
Yeah, and after that, it's like, well, you're here on your own. So we, of course, don't have that kind of money in cash. And so we decided to call the Mexican embassy. I didn't have high hopes for Mexico. I don't know.
I didn't either. I mean, I didn't know what to expect. I had higher hopes for the U.S. Embassy, but Mai went ahead and called them around siesta time, and they were closed.
Yeah.
So around dinner, you called again.
Yeah, we took some time to think about our options, like what's the worst that could happen if we stay here. Of course, we were running out of like the days that we were going to be with our host family, so we had to find another place to stay soon. We were also going to stay 2 nights at the hotel that the Niños de Guatemala organization has in Guatemala, but of course that was canceled too, so we didn't have a place to stay. We figured that most of the Airbnbs in the area were going to be booking fast, so we just took a moment, walked around, just kind of like figuring out what our options were.
Yeah, we felt things were coming to a point because we were debating on either staying for a couple of weeks to see how things played out, which had its advantages and disadvantages, or just trying to get out as soon as possible so that we could get home. And with the idea of staying in Guatemala, we could have gotten an Airbnb potentially, but we just had no idea what could happen during that time. Things could get much, much worse, and we didn't want to risk that. We wanted to get home so that we could feel we were somewhere that we were familiar with and where we had the resources to hopefully get us through this crisis.
Yeah, because we didn't know if maybe tomorrow the Mexico borders were also going to be closed. What if the US decides like nobody else is going to be allowed in airports in the US? What if Puerto Rico decides to stop all kinds of transportation too? So we just wanted to get home as fast as possible. So we called the Mexican embassy again, and they told me we are trying to put together a group of people who we might be able to take to the Mexican border by land on a bus, but this would only be for Mexican citizens with a Mexican passport. And I thought, well, I have a Mexican passport,
But I don't.
but he doesn't. And the guy was like, no, I'm sorry, we are here to help Mexicans, and I I think you should find someone, maybe a friend who can take you there. I know for a fact that there have been other people just traveling to the border between Guatemala and Mexico, and they have been able to cross the border by walking. So I'm pretty sure you can do it, but if you want to come with us, it's gonna be just you, basically. And so I was like, no.
Yeah, so we went to bed that night thinking we basically had two options. We were going to take an Uber to the border, which is much cheaper than the $420 option that we saw. I think it would have been like $158 or 1,200 quetzales. Or we could just show up at the Mexican embassy and see if they would take me, being that we would already be there. So we went to bed thinking, maybe we should just do that. We'll take an Uber from Antigua to Guatemala City and see what the Mexican embassy had to say.
So the next day we got up at around 4:30 a.m. We finished packing everything. We got an Uber from Antigua and went to the Mexican embassy in the city of Guatemala. And the bus was supposed to be leaving at 7 a.m. We got there, I think, at 6 a.m. and we only saw 3 other people waiting there, and we thought, oh, maybe it left without us.
Yeah, but the people who were there, the women, it was only women who were there at the time, right? They said that they were just waiting for somebody to show up. The embassy wasn't open yet. Eventually, the security guard came around and said, oh, you need to go to this door over here. And they started admitting people into the embassy. So on the way in, they were giving us hand gel to make sure that we were sanitizing our hands before we went in. And they gave us masks and they checked our passports. And this is when tensions ran high yet again, because everyone else going in had a Mexican passport and I did not. So Mai presented her passport and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not Mexican, but we're married.
Yeah, they were all just like looking at each other like, no, I don't know. And then I started crying. They're like, I'm not living without him. Yeah, it was too much. I think it was just at that point, it felt like that was our only option, really. I mean, we could go there on an Uber, but we didn't know how much more money we were going to spend. The transportation that the Mexican embassy had was going to be free, and so we thought, this is our way out. This is our only way out, really. And so they took Jim's passport and they were like, yeah, but you understand that this is only, like, this is the Mexican embassy. We're gonna do everything we can to help you. But it was obvious that they were kind of like, we don't know if you're gonna be able to come with us. So we just went in, we sat down, and they started just calling everybody by name. They had us fill out some paperwork.
And as they registered everyone, they were obviously prioritizing by people who had conditions or people who were more at risk. So elderly people, pregnant women. There was one pregnant lady and a guy with diabetes. So they were at the top of the list. And then they told us there were 3 buses that were going to leave and they could have a maximum of 10 people in each bus.
Including the driver. And so that's when I started counting the number of people in the room to see if we were going to fit. And it looked like even though we were at the bottom of the list, being some of the younger people in the group who were there, and me not even being a Mexican citizen, it looked like they were going to be able to get us on the bus as well. They came back and he told me, fill this out, just fill it out for you. It's going to be for both of you. And then I was like, okay, so that means that he's coming? I didn't ask, but I assumed.
Yeah, so they gave us lunch. They gave us sandwiches and fruit and a bottle of water for each person, even a Coca-Cola, which I thought was funny because we noticed in all of Guatemala, Pepsi is dominant there, but in Mexico, it's all about Coca-Cola. So they gave out Cokes to everybody, and we got on the shuttles.
Yeah.
I was so grateful to Mexico for allowing me to get on, not even being a citizen. We told them we were married, but they were just trusting us. They didn't ask for any sort of paperwork. So I could have been really anybody. We could have just been dating or maybe just met the night before. Like, hey, can you help get me on the shuttle to Mexico?
So they are helping people just leave Guatemala. at this point.
Yeah. We don't know if you have to have some sort of connection, though. I don't know if they would take just anybody, but they helped me, and they are helping others.
Gracias.
The ride to the border was crazy hot. There was no air conditioning in the van we were in, at least, and everyone was sweating, and there was a lot of windy roads. But after 5.5 hours approximately, we made it to the border.
So they had taken our temperatures before going on the van, and then when we got to the crossing, the bridge there between Guatemala and Mexico, they took our temperatures again to compare if there was any person who was getting a fever who was in the bus. So we got there, they did the medical checkup, they asked for our passports, and I think they stamped on our way out of Guatemala. Then we crossed the bridge over to the Mexican side.
Yeah, there's the official bridge that goes over a little river that separates Guatemala and Mexico. And it was such a sigh of relief to be walking as we were going across the bridge to see Bienvenidos a Mexico. Like, oh yes, we're so close. But it was about that time when I got a text message with an article talking about how Puerto Rico had just requested to shut down all of the airports on the island. So at that point, we really knew that time was not on our side. We had to get to Puerto Rico as soon as possible.
And we didn't have any flights then. Everything we had was canceled. So we made it to the Mexico side of the border, and they stamped our passports again. We didn't have Mexican money. So we walked through the middle of this town. It looked like there was like some kind of fair going on.
And hold up, right when we crossed the border, you could tell there's a night and day difference about how they were treating the situation in Guatemala compared to Mexico. Because the lady who checked us out to get through the border at immigration there wasn't wearing a mask, wasn't wearing gloves, was in contact with all of these different people. And we realized that like the news hadn't even gotten there, it seemed. Like no one was taking it seriously at all.
Yeah, we walked through this little town. We were the only people wearing masks. Like everyone was looking at us like we were just some character out of some weird movie. I don't know. And also like all the taxi drivers were like, 600 pesos to the airport, 800 pesos to the airport, 1,000 pesos to the airport. And we were like, we don't even have money. We had to find a place, an ATM. We went and got money, and we asked a guy who was driving a triciclo where we could find a taxi that was reasonable that would take us to the airport in Tapachula.
We were able to catch a taxi for 500 pesos. We get from Tapachula to the airport.
So then we are on our way to the airport. We are trying to book any flight from that airport to either Mexico City or Cancun or the States, and we found one that was going to Mexico City, and we tried and tried and tried.
And the signal was cutting out.
Yes.
And you have to understand, we didn't buy the ticket before we crossed the border because we weren't even 100% sure if we were able to cross the border or at what time were we going to cross the border. So we were frantic.
Yeah, we were also thinking about just staying the night in Tapachula and then maybe finding a flight the next morning. But again, we didn't know. With how quickly everything was changing, we just wanted to get out fast. And we made it to the airport there, and there was so many people, and a lot of them were coughing, and nobody was wearing masks. I mean, there was like hand sanitizer gel everywhere in the airport, but everyone who was going from Guatemala to Mexico, everybody was there trying to find a flight outside of the country.
Yeah, I think it was obvious that maybe about half of the people in the airport were foreigners from other countries, not from Guatemala or Mexico. A lot of people that just didn't seem like they were taking it seriously at all.
Yeah, a lot of hands on faces, a lot of like sneezing and coughing, and we were just like, people, stop touching everything, stop coughing and touching things.
Yeah.
It was a little bit stressful, but we managed to find a flight leaving from there to Mexico City. And so we went through security and we were on our way to Mexico City that day.
Yeah. The process going through airport security was a joke. Like the paperwork they gave us to fill out, there was no checking to see where we had been. They weren't checking passports or
Temperature.
Yeah, they didn't even check temperature. They asked what our symptoms were, if we had any symptoms of being sick. But other than that, I mean, there were even people coughing on their way through security and they were doing nothing about it. So we knew we had to get out of there as soon as possible.
Yes.
So we got onto the plane from Tapachula to Mexico City and it was basically full. There were, again, mostly foreigners on that flight. I assume we're trying to get out of the country as well. And it was scary, guys. Like, we had our masks on and very few other people did. There was a guy sitting behind me on the other side of the aisle who I'm 100% positive said, "I've got a feeling I have it." And I thought, oh no. Like, we had talked about this risk. Staying in Guatemala, we felt really safe because they were controlling the situation. They were shutting down the borders and they really were doing everything they could at that point to try to slow the spread of the situation. But we saw that that was not the case in Mexico. We thought, we could stay in Guatemala, maybe not get it, but possibly get caught up in a situation where we don't have the resources to get through, or we could make it to Puerto Rico and expose ourselves to a lot of people along the way. And that was definitely the case. We were exposed to a lot of people who potentially already had it.
Yeah, and I also got a lot of messages from friends and just some comments on Instagram and YouTube saying like, why don't you just stay in Mexico? Why don't you just go with your families? But it's exactly that. Like, we had been exposed to so many people that I don't want to say I feel like I have it, because I don't. Like, I feel healthy, but we don't know. Like, maybe we have it and we just don't have the symptoms. Why would I want to bring this thing to my family or to your family? Like, I know you were saying like, maybe we should go to Rochester, to Minnesota. They have the Mayo Clinic there. We would be safe. But it's that, like, how can you have that, like, in your conciencia, or like a cargo de conciencia, knowing that, oh, you're the one who brought this virus to our family. We didn't want that. We just wanted to be home, and just knowing that we would self-isolate for as long as it's needed, and not touch anything and not spread it or give it to anyone if we have it.
Yeah, and we were careful, so we just wanted to get to Mexico and take it from there.
So when we made it to the Mexico City airport, again, nobody was really checking. Everybody was close to each other, no social distancing or nothing. We went to one of the lounges there, and our next flight was leaving from Mexico City to Panama and then to Puerto Rico. So we were like, okay, we can rest. Our flight was leaving at like 5 a.m, I think. We took a shower, we had dinner, and from there, I think we were getting ready to just have a few minutes of sleep when we received the email that our flight to Panama was canceled too. And then again, everything was like a roller coaster of emotions. We were finally feeling like we were getting closer to being home, and then nope, it's canceled. So we were freaking out again. We were like, okay, we need to find another flight. There has to be some other flight leaving from Mexico City. It's a huge airport. We have to find something. And we were just so tired.
We were exhausted. We hardly slept at all that night. We found another flight for Delta. It was going Mexico City, Atlanta to San Juan, and we thought, okay, so that's our chance. At least that's not going to a country that currently had their borders closed, because we didn't know about the situation with Panama, and that's why they canceled the previous flight. So we decided to book the Delta flight. Mai took care of most of that while I was trying to get a few minutes of sleep, and so I just clicked reserve. We were done with it.
Yep, so we went to another lounge. We stayed there for another I don't know, 2
Couple
hours before our flight left, and we made it to Atlanta, yes. And the situation in Atlanta was also very relaxed.
Yeah.
I mean, there wasn't a lot of people in the airport. We heard that's like the busiest airport in all of the US, but I don't know how many people were on the flight. It wasn't a full flight.
No, it didn't seem that busy. And when we got there, we went to another lounge, and there things seemed so lax. Up to that point, we had seen a lot of places in Mexico where they had hand gel out ready for you to use so that you could disinfect your hands. But at this other lounge, they had a buffet that was out in the open.
In Atlanta.
And there was a guy who went up to the buffet and sneezed like all over the buffet, and I couldn't believe that nobody said anything to him. I feel a little guilty that I didn't say anything to him, but I thought certainly the workers would see that and say something. But no, the vibe was also very relaxed in the United States. It didn't seem like people were taking it that seriously either in the US at that point in time. Mm-hmm. So we had like 2 full days of travel, but it felt like one because we hardly slept. One day ran into another. Everything was just a blur. But finally, we were able to get on the plane to San Juan.
This might be the emptiest plane we've taken today.
I would say that there was around 25 people on an airplane that could accommodate probably 150 people.
This might be one of the last flights to San Juan because the governor of San Juan is trying to shut down all of the airports on the island to further quarantine and keep people safe. So maybe we got lucky.
And they were really nice to us. They gave us extra snacks because there was hardly anyone on the plane. And we finally descended into San Juan. We were so happy. We knew that at that point we were home.
But we also knew that there was a curfew here in Puerto Rico, which is from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. Nobody is allowed unless you are going to the hospital or the drugstore, I think. And Uber only works from the airport to your home or from your home to the airport. And we were not sure if we were gonna run into trouble, maybe having the cops stop us. They are multando.
They were giving tickets to people who were out after curfew. If you got this ticket, it was $5,000 and up to 6 months in jail.
So yeah, we didn't want that to happen to us. And we noticed also like in the airport, there was practically no one there, but they were checking your temperature again and they were giving you like a
little slip of paper that said that if you had any of these symptoms, you need to call this number.
It's been crazy, but we made it home. We saw no one on the way home from the airport. I think we saw 3 patrullas. Cops, and that's the most we've ever seen in the streets of Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I joked with the Uber driver saying that maybe with the fines they're handing out, they could get rid of some of Puerto Rico's debt, because $5,000 a pop, I mean, how many people would they need? But it looked like people, for the most part, were obeying the curfew.
Yes.
So we're incredibly grateful to be home. It feels like such a relief just to be here. We're fine with being inside. We're self-quarantining for at least 2 weeks. I believe the curfew is until the end of this month, but the way things are developing, I could easily see that being extended. We learned that Puerto Rico is unable to close their own airports. That's why they had to ask for permission from the FAA. And the FAA has already responded tentatively that as a rule, territories cannot shut down their airports. Now that we're here, I think that is terrible because Puerto Rico is trying to do everything they can to control the situation, but they don't have the right to even close down their own airport. So while the curfew is in place, people can still come here to try to escape from the chaos in other areas. And that's not necessarily a good thing because as residents of the island, I would rather feel safe that we're here and isolated from other incidences. But Puerto Rico currently doesn't have the power to really do much more than they already are. Now that we're here and settling down a bit, I was able to kind of sort through the canceled flights that we had, and we learned that in total there's about $1,193 in canceled flights that are tied up on our credit card right now. We can't do anything to get refunds at this point. It's impossible to contact the airlines. Even via email, they get back to you and say, it's going to be a while because we are really backed up. They have so many cases of people who are trying to cancel their flights or reschedule or get a refund that it's just, there's no hope in contacting them right now.
So we were feeling very guilty for wanting to be home when you shouldn't be traveling and you should avoid public places, but we were really doing everything possible to stay away from people. We were washing our hands so often. We were applying hand sanitizer every 20 minutes. Even if we were not touching anything, I was just like, hand sanitizer, hand sanitizer.
So the other day when we posted that we were going to be making this video update, we asked if anybody had any questions about traveling during this time. And again, no one should be traveling right now other than to get home, other than for essential travel. And we obviously thought that our travel getting here was justified. But someone asked if what we felt about how different countries were handling everything and where we felt like people didn't care as much or cared the least about the current situation. And
I'm gonna have to say Mexico.
Yeah, Mexico was probably the first and not caring, second US, and third Guatemala. Guatemala was taking the most precautions for protecting their citizens, for protecting the country from this situation, and I felt safest there.
Yeah, we were watching everything the president was saying, and we were like, that makes sense. Of course, you want people not to go on the chicken buses where you can fit 100 people. Of course, you don't want teachers to go to school. Of course, you don't want people going to bars and restaurants. Like, everything was closed. Our last day in Antigua, it felt like a ghost town. Just walking to get our laundry washed and back to the house. Everything was so quiet there because people were listening.
And contrast that with walking into Mexico. We essentially walked into a fair immediately after crossing through immigration at the border, and nobody was wearing masks. There were tons of people there. Obviously, in a market like that, everyone has cash, so you're exchanging germs that way. And the way people were looking at us, it was obvious that they weren't ready for this, or they weren't used to seeing people walking around with masks. I know when everybody's healthy at the airport, I usually assume someone with a mask must be sick, but now in Guatemala, you would see tons of people with masks. I'd say more people were wearing them than people who were not. And that was a good thing.
The only places in Mexico where I felt safe was the lounges.
Yeah.
Because they had hand sanitizer. Every time I went to the bathroom, the ladies were cleaning everything and sanitizing the doorknobs and everything.
They were wiping down the chairs where people had been sitting. And yeah, they seemed like they were taking more precautions there in the lounges. But compare that to the lounge in Atlanta with open food. I was very disappointed.
Yeah.
I was very disappointed in how the U.S. was handling the situation, and very disappointed in how the U.S. Embassy was handling the situation, getting citizens out.
So now that we are back home, we are going to be working on all of the projects we had planned to be working on before going to Guatemala. We have a few videos of Guatemala. We're also launching our podcast, which we are really excited about, and we have more videos for you guys. So we're not going to stop. We're used to being home editing just on our own most of the time. So we're going to continue doing that.
And in case you guys didn't know, right now is really a difficult time to be an online creator like we are. So if you would like to support us on Patreon, you would help support the podcast that will be launching soon, and we'll leave a link for that below as well.
Thank you guys for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. We hope you got some useful information out of it. Don't forget to stay inside, wash your hands, don't touch your face, don't travel right now, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more travel and Spanish tips.
Remember, el camino es el destino.
The journey is the destination.
Nos vemos pronto.
Adios.